Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wisdom from North, the place where we're diving into the deeper meaning of life and asking the big questions. My name is Janneke, and today I have Gigi Young on my show. Gigi is a former fashion model, and she was raised as an atheist, but today she works as an intuitive consultant and spiritual development coach, and she also has her own YouTube channel where she gives advice on spiritual matters and also brings up various spiritual topics like ETs and how to connect with your guides and how to develop your intuition and so on. And today we will be speaking about ET races and why this starseed stuff matters at all. Hello, Gigi. Welcome. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Well, that's wonderful. I wrote on my Facebook page that I would love for people to recommend people to interview. And a lot of people wrote your name. So I checked.
Really?
Yes. And I hadn't heard about you before. So I checked out your YouTube channel and I got hooked. Like I've seen so many videos. I love them. Yeah, because you really explained thoroughly complex spiritual concepts in a way that I can understand. And also you're saying a lot of things that is resonating with me and that I've picked up in my interviews. And that's also always a great feeling. But my impression is, because you are focusing a lot on Starseed and ET, and that's what we're going to speak about today. But my feeling is that a lot of people who are spiritual is looking away, like they are steering away from extraterrestrials and the galactic family because they might think it's obscure. And from what I know, you also did that a while ago. Like you thought it was like sci-fi and it wasn't anything for you.
Yeah, I was kind of creeped out by it. It was I thought that aliens existed and that it was arrogant not to believe in aliens, but I didn't want to join the spiritual world and ETs. I didn't think that that was together. I believed in angels and consciousness and that sort of thing, like Doreen Virtue and, the very first wave, what I kind of call first wave information. And it wasn't until, I was meditating and I opened up that I became aware of the connection. And I think that it is actually a logical connection to make, but I think that it's going to take some time for people to make that association.
So today I really want to learn more about ET races because to me I've been a little bit confused about this race and that race, and some speak about the Pleiadians, other about the Zetas and etc. And then you have this video where we spoke about all these races. So I was thinking that we could go through them to kind of have this overview. And I wanted to start with the Pleiadians because I hear more and more about them. And me personally, I feel very drawn to them because from the pictures I've seen, they seem very beautiful. And they seem very heartfelt. Can you tell us about the Pleiadians?
That's absolutely right. I think that if you were to describe the Pleiadians as an archetype, you would probably feel a lot of love in your heart, very heart-centered, a lot of wisdom about the heart and how to integrate the heart, and also a lot about femininity, like the divine goddess, things like that. That's all very Pleiadian. That's the Pleiadian archetype within us. And that's what they represent to us. To other people or other races of beings, they might not represent that, but to us, that's what they represent. And that's why a lot of people are connecting with Pleiadians, because we are moving away from a patriarchy and we're kind of going more into an egalitarian cycle. And that means that we need more of that feminine energy to come forward in a balanced way. And I think that's why they're coming forward so strongly to so many different people. It's so relevant.
So where do they stay in the universe? Like, where do they come from?
Great question. So I used to get these comments on my videos that were like, the Pleiades is empty. There's nobody that lives there. There's no life there. Well, we have to remember that when we're talking about ET races, galactic beings, interdimensional beings, there is no time. Time doesn't exist. So we may look into the Pleiades star system and we may see no life from our timeline, but from like the trajectory from the span, there was life there. We just can't see it in line parallel with our timeline. So whenever we talk about, I guess, ET beings, we have to remove time entirely, and we have to go only by consciousness and resonance. So where are the Pleiades? The Pleiadians? Well, they're some of them are, I would say, on crafts. Some of them have ascended beyond physical form, and they kind of communicate through kind of a conglomerate consciousness with people and individuals, sort of like Wendy Kennedy. I believe she communicates with just like a consciousness of Pleiadians that are very high dimensional. So there's that energy. There's also Pleiadians from what would kind of be like our past that are located in maybe a different area, maybe still the Pleiades. I'm not exactly sure. So they're it's kind of different depending on where you tune into the Pleiadians in their trajectory, in their evolution, I would say. Oh. If that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, that's interesting. So they're not, we can't say that they are situated in this galaxy. Like there they are. Or
I personally don't feel like you can, because the Pleiadians they've perhaps started in one place. Many people say Lyra, and I agree that, the race that is a Pleiadian started in Lyra, and they've kind of been everywhere, and they've evolved on a different scale, like they're kind of a bit ahead of us. So when you get to that point where you're in fifth dimensional, you already have space travel, you have time travel, so you're not so much limited to a physical place. But as we're so physical here with Earth, we want to put them in a place. But it's more about consciousness and resonance, I would say, to understand them.
And you firstly had a connection with a Pleiadian guide, right? That was the first guide that came to you?
I did. I was like hoping that I would get like, a normal Earth guide. I don't know, like maybe like an Egyptian lady or something, or, like something. And I was meditating, and the word Pleiadians just kept coming into my mind. And I had read nothing at the time. This was like, I think 2000, I don't know, maybe like 7 or 8, maybe even before then. And I wasn't there, it wasn't online. Like there wasn't a lot of information online even. And it just popped into my mind. I ignored it. I tried to ignore it again and again. And it was just so strong. I started having dreams. And I was like, okay, I have to stop trying to control what I want. And I have to just surrender, and I have to just listen, because this is obviously important.
Interesting. So what about the Arcturians? I've done one interview with Norma Milanovic. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Right. I always pronounced it incorrectly. And she spoke about the Arcturians. Can you speak about them? Like, what's the difference between them and the Pleiadians? Because from what I understand, they are benevolent also.
Absolutely. The benevolent thing, I have a little bit of a different perspective. I think that you have to tune into different races in their timeline of when they've existed. So if you tune into any ET race in the beginning of their life cycle, connecting with people, maybe they have more ego, so they're more negative or malevolent. But if you tune into most races beyond that timeline, when they're ascending further, you can get very pure information, and they're not malevolent. But
that's interesting. I want to comment on that, because I was going to ask you about that. And I think we will get to that when we come to the Zetas. And I've actually learned a lot from watching your videos, because I have had a tendency of like staring away from, the bad aliens, like being afraid of them, and like, no, I don't want to go into that. But you and Richard Nielsen, for instance, really gave me this other perspective. So we'll get into that. So yeah, back to the Arcturians.
So yes, the Arcturians are a different archetype to our consciousness than the Pleiadians, but they would both be categorized as like an ET consciousness or ET race. I would say if you were to compare the two, I would say the Pleiadians are more they more interactive with us directly and even genetically. Arcturians really connect with us more from our mind and our spirit. They're not so much the ETs that have come in and genetically done things or are more physically involved. The Arcturians really work with us very closely with in dream time, spiritually and mentally. I haven't, in my experience and what I know, they're not so much the ones to really be too physically involved. A lot of different ET races have different levels of involvement with humans. Some very physical, right down to genetics and interference, and then others are more kind of standoffish, just wishing to influence through energy, through sacred geometry, kind of gently guiding, and I would put the Arcturians in that category personally. Yeah.
So what about the beings that Bashar is communicating? Who are they?
I believe that Daryl Anka who channels Bashar, actually works with a Sasani being, which is a hybridized being of Zeta and human. I believe that's what it is.
Right. So that, yeah, he says that too, that they are us in the future. In a way?
Yes. I think that he says that, and that that's kind of what the notion is because Zetas, which are the other half of the Sasani race, they move so far away from their heart and their emotional body, and they disconnected from it. And when they did that, they disconnected from their spirituality, and their reproductive systems failed, and they needed to kind of reconnect with their heart. They needed to reconnect with their emotions in order to continue on. And a lot of people could say that humanity has also been on a very similar path to that, where we have, in a lot of ways, moved away from our hearts, and we have moved into mind too much, and we lean too much on mind. And so there's a parallel there. There's a parallel with our civilization and the Zeta civilization. And that parallel is actually what's allowed them to perceive us and connect with us. If that parallel did not exist, we would not be in their reality. They would not be able to perceive us. And there is no coincidence that the Zetas have found us and really started to interact with us around the time that we were messing around with atom bombs, and we were, really getting into World War II time around the 40s.
Yeah, because was that the time when they started with the abductions and creating hybrid children?
That was around the time. According to my knowledge, and a lot of clients that I've worked with have confirmed this, who actually have government connections. That's around the time when they started to come around. The abductions now have been teetering off. We're not as subject to those, not the kind of abductions that was happening, but that's when they started, and they continued very strongly into, the 80s and even into the 90s. So.
Yeah, I just did this interview with Richard Nielsen, and she talked about that. And I mean, on some level, that's why I've always looked at the Zetas. I used to call them the Greys, for those people who don't know that that's the same. I used to look at it kind of in horror, because I saw these movies, and I saw Taken by Steven Spielberg, and it seemed horrible to be abducted. But can you share some perspectives on what purpose this program has had?
Well, the purpose for the Zetas was to regain their humanity, because they were very similar to humans until they ruined it all. until they disconnected. But so their purpose was to regain their humanity and their spirituality, because they saw in us this raw, pure kind of this pureness that we still had, even though we were kind of warring and I guess primitive. We still had this pure we were still kind of the pure creation, I guess. So that was their purpose, but a great purpose for us that we can benefit from, that should sort of, if you've had a bad experience, that's going to be tough to move through, but what should help you move through that is that from those abductions, there was a hybrid race created, which one of them is called the Sasani, which we know through Daryl Anka channeling Bashar. What that race is going to be instrumental in raising our consciousness, because they represent a bridge to the heart and the mind, which is exactly where we are right now. So they're going to be a representative of where we can go, where we can be. And they've been through that. They are that. So they're actually going to be helping us through. And had we not, connected with these beings or given them our genetic information, we wouldn't have access to a hybridized race that can help us and assist us through.
So do you think in Roswell that these beings that were found, were they Greys?
I believe so. I've heard a couple different things. I think that they were Greys. I think that they were Zeta beings. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on. Guys, if you want to know more about the hybrid children, I really recommend to watch Bridget Nielsen's interview, because we really delved into it there. So let's move on to talk about more races. Lion beings. I've never heard of that. What is
Lion beings, yeah. It's something that has been around in Egypt and a couple different civilizations. We can see the lion beings kind of coming forward with Sekhmet, which is an Egyptian deity that is a lion. Also the Sphinx, we can see a lion there. So in Egypt, we can see kind of this cat worship and this lion worship, and it's kind of like, well, what's that? And it's because that was one of the stargates where lion beings used to come through and work a lot on the people. They were very connected to that. So lion beings are a very special and particular race of ETs that have been working with us for a long time.
So do you have a connection, or do you have a guide that's a lion being?
I do have a lion being guide, and he's wonderful. And lion being guides specifically teach about self-confidence, life purpose, fearlessness. They're very much like a warrior spirit. Most people that I've met that are actually Leos have a lion guide, because it's such a specific energy, that leadership energy to have. And I actually, he was a second guide that came forward, I think, second or third. And I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot through him.
So how do you see him? Like, how does he look like? Do you see him kind of physical? Not that he is physical, or is he? Or could he be? Could he manifest as physical?
He could be physical. ET beings haven't been largely physical and recognized as physical on our planet for quite some time. But there are people who are having physical encounters with them again. I have not experienced Alm or any of my guides in the physical. It's mainly been a consciousness thing. I haven't asked for that. I don't so much desire that at this time. But I first came across him right when I was falling asleep. And then it was like boom in front of my face, and it was like a steely blue lion being, and then he just started to talk to me basically about my life and where I was at the time, and I noticed his energy to be very different than other guides I had worked with, so I knew that it was a different being.
So what about the movie Avatar? I just thought of that. Is that a specific being, or is that a fantasy? But in a way, I feel like everything we think is fantasy is actually existing. So
I agree. I think that he was onto something. I think that he was tapping into something, and I think that he was onto something. And I think that's why that movie was so popular. Because
it resonated in a lot of people.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So is it how do they manifest in a way? Like, what does it take for them to manifest? Is that something they can choose to do? And do they then have to become more dense and use, like, can they use different bodies in a way to manifest? Because it's in Taken. I don't know if you've seen it, by Steven Spielberg. They can appear as different people. And they can like mess with your mind, so you see this person or that person. Or are they? Do they have like a container that's, you know, this is the way a Pleiadian would look like, or this is the way a lion being would look like?
I think that they can sort of materialize themselves. I think it would take a whole lot of energy to do that. But it is done. And back in the day when they were materializing more, the Earth was a totally different frequency than it is now. So that's why they were able to materialize then and not now. We've kind of changed changed our frequency, and that's what allowed them to not materialize as well. And it was meant to happen that way. We were meant to go through kind of a darker period where we were depending more on our own minds and our own hearts, and not so much on other things. But as for, you know, possession, which I think is really what that would be, a being kind of coming into your body and taking it over, I've never seen that to actually be true. I've never seen that to actually happen. In order for any kind of channeling to happen, you have to basically give permission on some level for that to happen. No being can just come in and forcefully take over, take you over.
So how far was that back that we were in a different frequency?
I mean, years. I'm always so bad with putting years. I think that the last precession of the equinox was 32,000 years. I think that's the precession, and I know that the cycles are sort of like that. Atlantis was probably the last time that it happened in the Atlantean period. That would have been probably one of the last times. Yeah.
So what about these reptilians that are not very popular?
No, they're not.
Yeah, what about them?
Well, they have a really bad reputation because, you know, every being that we've talked about the Pleiadians, and I mean, the Arcturians are kind of more of a spiritual, angelic being, but they're all sort of mammalian. They all are sort of mammalian, and we relate to them in that way because they're mammals. Reptilians aren't. They're not mammalian. So initially, right away, there's a fear there. These are not beings we relate to. They don't have, you know, they don't reproduce like we do. They don't carry their young. They're a different species. So that causes a fear initially. And also they're wired differently. They're that race of being represents, not unlike the Zetas, which is often why you see them working together and being compared together. I don't know if you've heard about that, but like Dracos and Zetas like banding together. But they also represent a very, very deep polarity of mind. They represent really going into logical mind and also really into masculinity and really pushing aside anything to do with emotions or compassion, empathy, femininity, anything like that is weakness. And that was really the story of their progression. So if you tune into a reptilian being and they're in the beginning of their development, that is the struggle they're going to have. They're going to have a struggle with balancing their masculinity, logic, dominating others, victimizing others, because they really represent that aspect of the spectrum, the God spectrum. So of course, if that's what your journey is, you're going to take beings who are maybe more into the feminine, more emotional, and you're gonna victimize them. You're going to exploit them because that's where you are, and that has been one idea of our relationship to them, is just focusing on that victim paradigm and just going kind of back and forth between that paradigm. A lot of people choose to focus on that.
So what is the connection when we say the reptilian brain?
Yeah, the reptilian brain is the part of our brain that basically is instinct, and it's sort of it really kind of in a nutshell represents what reptilian consciousness is and reptilians are sort of about. But of course, we have to remember that reptilians evolve just like every other species evolves. So that's a very primitive reptilian brain, but reptilians did evolve into more spiritual beings and more connected beings.
So is your belief that these beings are all also aware of, let's say, spirituality and God, and like we are, yearning for answers? Are they also aware of a kind of a spiritual concept in a way, that there's something higher than them even?
Yes, they are, and that has been their journey. They are God. They are created by the exact same God that created us. At the end of the day, they came from the same
Source
spectrum that we did. So they can be God realized just like we can be God realized. And I believe that is as much their purpose as it is ours. And if you choose to focus on any species, even our own species, in the beginning of their development, then you're going to see a lot of negative qualities of their personality, of their expression. You're just going to see that because they're really grounding their negative polarity in order to come to the other side of it. That is what ascension is. That is what evolution is. We talk a lot about ascension and the coming together of things, the joining of things, the rising above things, integrating. But we don't always talk about the descension that has to happen before we get there. And races do go through descension periods. Earth has gone through descension periods where we've sunk into separation and polarity to know ourselves more and to see our darker side so we can overcome it. And that is our process of enlightenment.
It is kind of complicated because I'm trying to look at this and see this in my mind, and then I am reminding myself that there's no such thing as time. So these beings are us in the future, these beings are us in the past, but they still exist in a way. And some people are saying that Zetas does not exist anymore, they died out. But I mean, they're still here because everything is now, so the past is now, so... then I lose it.
You know what? The time thing is so mind-blowing that I kind of just go by resonance now.
Okay.
And so what's a greater indicator of what's going on in your life is what resonates with you. So, for example, if you are going through a bit of a fearful time in your life, you might be connecting with beings who are fear-based through resonance, and they're connected to a timeline that's in the earlier part of their development, in their fear-based timeline. So in that way, you're connecting with, a different timeline. But if you are, say you're meditating a lot, you're eating very clean, you're really dedicated to your purification and your heart, you're going to connect with a being that is maybe from more of a future timeline, a greater future timeline, and that is going to be your connection. So it's more about where you are, like where you resonate. That's more important, because time doesn't really factor in as much. It's where you're resonating. And even with the Zeta thing, sorry.
Yeah.
Even with the Zeta thing that you mentioned, there was a timeline where Zetas died out. That does exist. There was a timeline and you can tune into that.
Right.
But there's also timelines where they survived, and you can tune into that.
Because what you're saying is that, in a way, or I don't know if you said that, maybe I just saw it in a video, that we are experiencing different realities, like each individual on the planet.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So we're not seeing exactly the same thing or experiencing the same thing.
Yeah, we see, I feel like we sort of perceive in like spectrums of reality. Like we're constantly switching timelines according to our vibrational frequency. So in that way, you are creating your future. So that's why it is so important to be positive, and it's more important to be to kind of take control a bit more and say, I'm going to be positive. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to take care of myself, because I am creating my future. And there are many different timelines happening at once, and I control that with my consciousness. And that's sort of how I explain some people sort of falling out of your life as well. I kind of see that as, when they were in a spectrum of consciousness, maybe they moved out of yours, or you moved out of theirs. And that's why sometimes people tend to disappear, or, we don't connect, you don't connect as much with them because they don't exist so much in your timeline anymore.
So the future is not one fixed, or it's not the same future for us in a way. Like our future, your future can be different from my futures. Like we could be on different timelines, experiencing different things. I mean, of course we will, but in a way it will be different realities that is aligned with your consciousness and with my consciousness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're creating it as you go. And that's why there's some people who, if you stay very afraid, maybe you will experience a FEMA camp or something very negative like that. But then there's people that also won't, because you're creating it.
Experience what?
Like, well, I remember, I don't know if people talk about it anymore, but people would always write and ask me like, oh my God, are we going to go into FEMA camps? Which was this basic. It was like this government-run, basically like concentration camp thing. Oh. Very conspiracy theorist, or I guess you can insert anything negative. Like, is the government just going to enslave us all, and we're going to be microchipped and all this kind of stuff?
Right.
And it was hard to answer it because it's, there isn't one future that we all share.
That's interesting and also very complicated, but so
because physics is kind of going along with that now.
Yes.
So I feel like we need some really good. I see that you interviewed Greg Braden. Amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys talked about that at all time, but
yeah. We talked about a lot. I think maybe we did, but we definitely spoke about the bridging science to spirituality, and he really explained that so well. What I find difficult is that in one way, I don't want to ignore, for example, let's say the reptilians and the Zetas. I want to know about them, but at the same time, I do want to focus on the positive. Like you said, it's important because that's a future I want to create. So where is that balance? I think that's a hard balance. And even in myself, looking at the dark inside of me, at the same time, because when you show light on it, people say it will release. But at the same time, stay positive and think positively, and affirmations and all that. So this balance, I think, is very difficult.
It's very, very difficult. It's also really important to let yourself feel pain and to let yourself get, to be honest with yourself. A lot of people, in the New Age movement, it's about never feeling anything low. It's about never being in fear. It's it's almost like a little bit too much in dreamland. It's not grounded. So I feel like you have to let yourself feel your fears and feel sad, but to never ever let go of beauty, to never ever let go of your heart in it. So you can feel that way, but I would say kind of communicate with it. Talk to whatever you're afraid of. If you're fearful of, a Zeta being or reptilian beings, what that archetypally says to me would be that, and I've been afraid of them too. I kind of am still, but at the end of the day, it says that might represent in our consciousness a fear of loss of control, or a fear of, being victimized, because that's what they represent to us. So it's good to use, ET beings or any spiritual being or any guide as a tool to show you where you are. And you can also ask your guides to show you what that means to you, why you feel fear, and also to maybe connect with positive reptilian beings and positive Zetas, because they are out there, and that could also help, balance out any fears they are. Because once you connect with, like a positive reptilian or a positive Zeta, it just puts everything in perspective. I have to say, yeah, you have to kind of experience both. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Be open, yeah. To experience,
like to have no resistance, actually.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Okay, accept everything, but you don't have to focus a lot on them.
Yeah, because your fear is telling you something, and you can use it, and non-resistance is a good way to move through fear, because it's saying I'm strong enough. It's saying I know that when I'm in my heart and when I'm connected, doesn't matter who comes around, I'm in control of my energy. So that's like the warrior part of you that goes into anywhere and knows that you're in control, and that's that part of it that comes out.
Yeah, self-empowerment. Yeah, and knowing how powerful we are, that we are not victims, that we are that powerful and strong.
And when you have that inside of you, beings like fourth dimensional beings that are stuck there, like Zetas or, reptilians that are stuck in the fourth dimension and they're still playing that weird game of negativity, they can't actually perceive you.
Oh.
They can't actually, that is the biggest secret to, a good spiritual defense is a good offense. And they can't actually perceive you when you're in fifth dimensional consciousness. They don't exist there.
And fifth dimensional consciousness, what is that? Like, how would I know that I'm there?
The best place to access that, I would say, would be in your heart, to be functioning from your heart. If you're too much in mind, be careful about spinning into, 4D consciousness, polarity. Mind tries to control a lot because it is analysis. That's what mind is. So if you're spending a lot of time in mind, you might be kind of in a bit of more susceptible to that. That's why going into your heart really introduces you to the fifth dimensional frequencies. And it's sort of more surrendered, more intuitive. And I would say that it's more neutral. That's how I would say. Anything to do with the heart is going to bring you into that 5D. I would say it's kind of the gateway into 5D, actually.
Oh, that's great, because that's very specific in a way. We all know the heart, not exactly like how to connect with our heart, but I guess that's the individual path in a way, that we all have to get to know our own hearts. That's a personal journey in a way. Yeah.
Because the heart it's very personal, and the journey into the heart is almost like a journey into all of your emotions that you've ever felt, and anything that you've suppressed is going to come forward. So it's really personal. So that makes it kind of hard to describe.
Yeah,
but
that's a whole other interview.
Yeah. And there are people that are really good at talking about it too. I think that, I forget what book it is. I think Bashar actually recommends it. I think it's like The Power of the Heart. I think that's a good book about it.
Okay, great. So a little bit back to the other beings. Let's see. Andromedas. I actually spoke to a Norwegian woman. She's a medium. She's very famous here in Norway. Her name is Lily Bendis. And I think, she said that she comes from the Andromedas, and she's channeling this being that's her in 5,000 years, I think, in the future or something like that.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah. So tell us about them.
Andromedans, as far as I know, are really magical beings. I think that they're very different than us consciousness-wise, so I feel like it is very special when anybody connects with them. But they are amazing manifestors. From what I know of them, they're able to take spirit and emotion and the etheric things and make them physical. They're great manifestors. They really specialize in, the manifestation process, taking things from non-physical to physical. And in the third dimension where we are, that's really important because we're one of the densest physical places to be. So that's why their influence is so important here. Okay. That's what I would say.
I like them. I feel attracted to them.
Sorry, I'm so interested. The medium that you interviewed, was she really good at manifesting things? Like really good at teaching people how to manifest in their life?
I mean, she has a lot of courses, and she's a great success, like in everything she does.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah,
because I just get it.
Yeah, she is. I mean, I think she's like 69 years old. She looks like she's like, I don't know, 50. and she's all around, television and doing a medium. She's a guest on this show, The House of the Spirits, where she's a medium, and then she does. And she appears everywhere, and goes to Sedona with groups, and yeah, she's just really alive. Like what's the word in English? Vital, and has a lot of energy, and really stands her own powers. Like, I mean, a lot of people are saying, like, what she's into, who are skeptical, because a lot of Norwegians are skeptical, especially towards this subject. That's like woohoo, but she's like, she doesn't care. She doesn't care at all.
Oh my God,
she's great.
Powerful.
Oh, you got to see it. Yeah. So Syrians. A lot of people are talking about Syrians. Who are they?
Yes. A lot of people have Syrian lineage within their soul. They've had incarnations there. And the Syrians I kind of parallel them to the Pleiadians in that they've been very involved with Earth, physically and karmically. A lot of Syrians, a lot of beings I've connected with from Sirius, and other people have as well, are water beings. There's a lot of
like dolphins?
Yeah.
Oh.
Exactly. Like dolphins, whales, especially. And it is said, and I happen to believe as well, that the dolphins are actually Syrian ETs that live here, and whales as well, but especially dolphins. And yeah, they're very. The Syrians are, I think that they teach a lot through play, and we can really see that in dolphins. And yeah, it's very diverse though. I always find that, like, for me, tuning into Sirius, there's so many different beings that are from, it's not like the Pleiades, where everybody sort of is very similar, or even the Arcturians. There's a lot of different types of beings there. And that makes me feel like it's actually like a stargate. So
a stargate. Can you explain what that is?
Arcturus is a stargate as well, but I don't think it's as physical. I think it's a higher dimensional stargate. I'm just theorizing, but I think it's a higher dimensional stargate than Sirius. A stargate is basically a portal where beings can come through to go from one place and one time to another. And I feel like what controls stargates is resonance. So the resonance of the area.
Is that on Earth? Like there are different stargates on Earth?
We have them on Earth.
Oh.
I'm pretty certain that we have one in the Middle East.
Oh.
I mean, if we think about it, what's happening there? I think that there's different stargates in different places on Earth for sure. I do know that stargates also open and close. And so they can be open for a while and usable to certain types of beings for a certain amount of time, and then they close. Depending on the oscillation, the back and forth of consciousness can open and close stargates for specific resonances, specific beings to come through. But there are also more permanent stargates because the cycles that they represent are longer cycles. And I believe that Sirius is a pretty major stargate, a pretty physical major stargate for many different beings.
Do we know of any people who have experienced like going through a stargate and come back?
You know what? I don't know if this is a stargate, but I know that the Montauk, I think the Montauk Project and the Philadelphia experiment, I think they tried to like send people through a stargate, and they ended up being stuck in like through a boat, and they ended up being stuck in the metal.
What?
And yeah, the American government has done some pretty crazy things. Had you heard of that?
No.
Oh. No. Okay. If you Google, and I'm sure your viewers will probably know way better than I know, but I know that the government, the U.S. government, probably also the Russian government, probably several different governments have been experimenting with time travel and going through different densities. And essentially we do it as well when we meditate. We're just going through stargates, but we're not going through in our physical body. That's the thing. We're not bringing it with us. So,
okay. Interesting. So we don't have time to go all through all the races. I mean, all the races. We don't know all the races, but I want to ask you, because you had a great video, why does this starseed matter at all? Like, why do we have to care about it? And you had some great arguments about it and some reflections. So can you share those?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people in this, I think in the spiritual community are like, why? Why should I care? Like, why should I focus on this? And I think they're thinking that it's just too crazy. But it's not crazy if you think about it in sort of with a different light. And that light is that star races and star beings are simply archetypes for us. They represent different aspects of our own consciousness. And in that way, we can learn about ourselves individually, but also ourselves as a society, as a planet. And if we try to look too closely at where we are individually or as a planet, we might be too triggered. So when we started communicating with different ET beings, we can learn about ourselves and also our planet without feeling super triggered and whatever, because we can say, wow, you guys went through the same thing, and this is how you dealt with it, and this is where you are now. So we get all this perspective on where we are. And I mean, if you're only tuning into like angelic consciousness, it's probably going to be that's probably going to be too airy-fairy and too pure love to really get into the nitty-gritty that ET consciousness really has to represent for us. I also very strongly feel that angels and certain guides and beings were ultra-dimensional beings. They were ETs, but we were not at a certain point in our consciousness where we could really accept that yet.
They were, or they are?
I think that they are, and I think that they always were.
Oh.
And I think because ETs are just ultra-dimensional beings. So, I mean, I think that they appear to us in a certain way when we're ready to see it, like kind of with wings or as guides. But I really feel like they were ETs. They were ultra-dimensionals, and we just sort of weren't necessarily ready to deal with that and what that represented. So we just kind of cut off half the information. And as we rise, I feel like we're more ready to actually come at more their level.
That's an interesting perspective. I haven't thought of angels like that before. Wonderful. I think we will end there and do our next interview. In that, we will speak about elves and fairies and elemental beings. And then I'll also ask you about how to connect with guides and how to connect with ET guides, because I want to cover that as well. And I think people are interested in how to connect with them, since it's important.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Gigi. Did I pronounce your name correctly? Was it Gigi?
You did.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
You're great. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for watching, guys. Much light from Oslo. Bye-bye.